Russett,
Ohio, Tom?
The key has been for the Kerry campaign to emphasize the economy more there than anywhere else in the country. One simple reason. George Bush carried Ohio by 171,000 votes in the year 2000. The state has lost over 200,000 jobs. Kerry goes back to that state day in and day out and kept saying, you see, you are economically depressed because of George Bush's policy. The president came back and said, look, I know things aren't as good as you want them to be, but we're on the way back. Stay with me.
Karl Rove and company believes that cultural issues will help them in the southeast and in the southwest in Ohio. They think that they lost votes last time around because in the closing days of the campaign, it was disclosed that George W. Bush had had a drunk driving arrest, and that kept some cultural conservatives at home, according to Mr. Rove and his operatives. They think they'll get them back this time, and that will make the difference. Tim, we're going to go to Mark. You get there with the voting that has already been completed and now is being counted. Let's begin with the state of Ohio, if we can, Tim. We really have two states going on there. You have the industrial north, and you have the more rural south. Karl Rove has believed from the beginning that they gave up votes in the rural south of Ohio 4 years ago because of then-Governor George Bush's drunk driving record that was revealed in the closing days of the campaign. They went back. They had a callback system for every voter. The Democrats did as well, but they believe in those swing counties in Ohio. They're running ahead of where they were 4 years ago, which is what they need to do.
Tom, if you care about the economy and health care, you're voting for John Kerry. If you care about moral values and taxes, you're voting for George Bush. And what the Bush campaign was able to do was energize their base as much as John Kerry was able to energize his. And while a lot of attention was placed on new registrants, which would be pro-Kerry, it appears that the Bush people went into those rural communities and really fired them up and had him come out for the president. And that's why we're seeing this dead-even race in Ohio.
And there's also, I think, probably, this is an estimate on my part, but I think there's a comfort factor with the president in those rural areas. It was hard for them to cross the line to vote for someone like John Kerry, who seemed more distant and patrician to them.
Eastern.
Yeah.
And the fact is, you go to southern Ohio on the border of Kentucky, it views itself as much more southern. Also, the president, the first lady, the down-home notion of their marriage, Laura Bush, she went there on a regular basis. Also, the referendum on gay marriage in Ohio was really an enticement for many of those rural voters to get out there and vote against it. You put all those ingredients together, and you see how difficult it is for Ohio to go into the Democratic camp. There's a reason that a Republican's never been elected without carrying Ohio. It's tough for Democrats to carry.
Despite the fact that the state lost 250,000 jobs in the last 4 years. And I remember being out there covering President Bush, and then Governor Bob Taft came on the plane, and he was pleading with him for some economic assistance and wasn't getting it at that time. What about the voting in 4 years? Both these candidates are winning the states that Al Gore and George Bush won 4 years ago. That brings it up now to 206 to 207 in the electoral vote. We're at parity, but it's those outstanding states that will make the difference, beginning down in southeastern United States, Florida, which is looking very strong for the president at this hour. Then John Kerry has to make a stand in Ohio. Let's go to NBC's Ann Thompson now, who is in the state of Ohio. Ann, can you give us any kind of a reading on when they're going to have a vote count out there? I see you have a guess. Maybe we can get some expert opinion.
I do have a guess, Tom. No, we expect a vote count to come much later. I guess it is tomorrow already, much later Wednesday morning. As you said, people have been in lines for literally hours here in Ohio. In fact, there was a precinct here in Franklin County that was still open at 11:15, still taking votes, trying to get everybody who wanted to vote, get all their votes tabulated. But in here, because everybody expected Ohio to be a cliffhanger, in the last couple of days, people haven't been talking about the margin of victory, but the margin of litigation. And Edward Foley from the Ohio State University Law School is here with me to explain just what is the margin of litigation in Ohio, Ed.
The margin of litigation is the difference between the number of provisional ballots that will have been cast today compared to the margin of victory for one of the candidates.
And so the losing candidate, what legal opportunities does he have to challenge the vote?
The losing candidate for the regular ballots will want to try to convert as many provisional ballots as possible into actual votes. because that's the way to make up the difference in the regular ballots.
We have seen extraordinarily long lines today. In fact, in Knox County, there are reports people have waited in line 9 hours. Does that provide the losing candidate any kind of legal opportunity to challenge the outcome?
I don't think so. If people left the lines, they can't vote, even though the lines were long. So I don't think there's any litigation over long lines that could change the vote totals. The only litigation that could change the vote total potentially is over the provisional ballots and whether they qualify as actual votes.
Ed,
well, Tom, I'm going to pose a hypothetical question to him, which is what law professors deal in. So what if it actually got to the point where it was all about Ohio and it was all about provisional and overseas ballots? The Secretary of State's office and the Secretary of State says, hey, we have to wait 10 days to get them all in order, make sure they're valid, and we don't start counting until day 11. I mean, you have this image of the entire nation sitting there twiddling their thumbs for 10 or 11 days while we wait for Ohio to get their ballots in order and start counting. First of all, is that a scenario that conceivably could happen? And second, is it required legally to happen that way?
I think it's actually a little bit misleading as an image, because what will happen starting maybe tomorrow in Ohio is they will begin to resolve the conflicts and disputes over these provisional ballots. That's the key issue with these provisional ballots. Somebody has shown up. Have they shown up at the wrong precinct? Should the ballot be counted? Should it not be counted? Somebody's shown up without the right identification. They cast a provisional ballot. Should that ballot be counted or not? All those issues about whether each of these votes is valid will begin to be sorted out tomorrow. So it's not
the outstanding issue in the Kerry campaign is the state of Ohio. The Kerry campaign continues to believe that NBC was premature in its judgment that President George W. Bush has won the state of Ohio, and it's very significant, 20 electoral votes, putting him within one vote of the 270 that he needs. They're going to spend the night deciding what they're going to do tomorrow morning. They believe that there are provisional ballots that could make the difference in Ohio for the Kerry campaign, and then in a combination of other states in the upper Midwest, they could put together a winning formula. So that's where it stands at this time. We continue to stand by our judgment, but we're not the final arbiter of all this. The voters are, obviously, and how the votes are tallied in those states. Based on, they're going to see what happens in the state of Ohio. Now, it's important to know that they've not yet dispatched legal teams or any political operatives out there on an extraordinary mission. So far as we know, they're going to make a decision in the morning. 144,000 votes separate them in the state of Ohio. The president has the lead. As you can see, NBC News has projected that George W. Bush is the winner in the state of Ohio. We did that well after the polls closed. That's our best judgment based on that vote and the computer models that we've been looking at, and taking into consideration what is likely to happen as well with the provisional ballots. The Kerry campaign believes that those provisional ballots must be counted before we can have an accurate reading, because if they can get Ohio back, they can put together a combination of other states and get to the 270 mark. I guess, Tim, all that I was talking about earlier tonight about whether or not these two parties could find some kind of common ground and resolution that will be affected by the bitterness of this final accounting that's going on in this election 2004.
Well, you heard Rudy Giuliani, and now the two Republican senators from Ohio are calling on John Kerry to concede. There's a very orchestrated campaign by the Republicans to try to bring closure to this race. Democrats are encouraging him to at least wait till the morning and see what the landscape looks like. And